So welcome everyone. My name is Jenny Hornick and I'm the digital marketing specialist here at JMIR Publications. And I'm really excited to welcome you today to our first ever webinar with the Journal of Participatory Medicine in collaboration with the Society for Participatory Medicine. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming an expert panel who will discuss the e-patient evolution, how digital health is redefining patient engagement. So we'll begin with that in just a moment, but before we do, I just wanted to call out a few housekeeping items. So firstly, all of your microphones will be muted for the duration of the webinar, but we do encourage that you engage with the speakers by submitting any questions that come up while they're talking. And you can do so by using the Q&A box that you'll find towards the bottom of your screen. And there'll be a designated time towards the end of the session to get to those questions. Additionally, I just want to let everyone know that the event is being recorded and you'll have access to the recording following the session. We'll send it out over email and it'll also be open on our YouTube channel. So that's all from me. I'd like to kick things off by introducing the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Participatory Medicine, Amy Price, who will start today's webinar by introducing our moderator and panel. So Dr. Amy Price is a senior scientist, editor, and participatory research leader working at the intersection of AI, health communication, and patient-centered innovation. She brings together clinicians, patients, and researchers as equal partners to co-produce knowledge that blends lived experience with scientific rigor. Dr. Price serves on international committees for the WHO and FDA and leads a global team studying AI-powered co-production and shared decision-making. Her work champions equitable, trustworthy AI and models inclusive research and editorial practices that shape the future of digital health. So with that, I'll pass things over to Dr. Amy Price to introduce the panel and kick us off.
Hi, I'm Amy Price, and I'm so excited to meet all of you today and to have this panel with such revolutionary, innovative, and thoughtful leaders. So I'm going to start with Gilles Frydman, who I met at a Stanford Medicine X conference, and I was stunned by his exemplary ability to bring about relationships and communication in difficult times, and his intelligent thoughtfulness on the issues of the day. Plus, he's an amazing photographer. But that's probably, he's going to share something completely different, but I just want to give you some background. And e-patient Dave, um, I think he was almost the first e-patient that I met during my journey. And I was trying to get my health records. And I came across, give me my damn data. And it really resonated. And then I found him on Forbes, and I found out that he wasn't talk, he was action. He's action personified. And he brings his whole being, his whole self into the issues of the day. And if e-patient Dave pays attention, that's a direction to be looking. And then we look at Dr. Danny Sands, and so I first learned about Danny Sands through e-patient Dave's book. And I thought, how interesting, the patient and the doctor writing this beautiful book, what a beautiful book together. And in those days, it wasn't a trendy or even acceptable thing to do. They pioneered, they did it together, and they formed the Society of Participatory Medicine, which is an incredible organization that has been an open home to so many people across the decades. And I love that they're bringing back into history Tom Ferguson, because we hear all about, Warner Slack and all these different people. But Tom Ferguson, when you read through, there's a white paper that they may bring up, they may not. But when you bring through that, you see Danny Sands and Nancy Finn in their paper, which will also be discussed, are bringing about the real history. And we watch all through history as people preempt phenomenal visionary ideas. And then when they're preempted by others, the others don't carry the same power or integrity that the original idea started with. And so then you're left with a little bit of a gap. And so they're going to go into explaining, sharing visionary things. And then we have Denise Silber, who's a known innovator and has done all kinds of things in that space between patients and doctors, and also has worked through the trends like virtual reality, and she brings it to the front in a real way that brings populations together. And so I'm not going to say much more because I want this time to go to our esteemed panelists. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Danny Sands, who will be moderating this team. And go for it, team. I'm your cheerleader. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Let me just share momentarily. Thank you, Amy, for kicking that off. So you've heard about this panel, and we misnamed the panel a little bit because when you talk about what has happened over the last couple of 25 years, let's say, with technology, digital health continues to redefine patient engagement and vice versa. And in fact, that is the theme of the paper that Nancy Finn and I wrote. And let me pause there and just say that Nancy Finn, unfortunately, was my co-author and a longtime contributor to the Society for Participatory Medicine. She passed away around the time the paper was published. So it makes us very, very sad. But Amy mentioned the white paper, and this is what the white paper looks like. And one of the things that the white paper talks about, it's all about really, is the e-patients. And e-patients represent this new breed of informed health consumers who go online to seek information on their own ailments and to find better health information services for others. They work collaboratively with their doctors and within the system to resolve health issues. Now, that's the e-patient. The thesis that I'm interested in is how e-patients have leveraged technology over the years. And that's what's really fascinating. That's what we talk about a lot in the paper. All of these technologies have been leveraged by patients over the years. And there's been this symbiotic evolution so that e-patients are leveraging these technologies, pushing these technologies to the limit, and encouraging new innovations in digital health technologies that are then provide tools for the e-patients to then again push forward. And so all of these evolutions of technology have been accompanied by evolutions in what e-patients have been able to do. Symbiotic evolution is best represented by the anemone and the clownfish. It's a mutualism. The clownfish seeks shelter amongst the anemone's stinging tentacles, and that protects them from predators. So what happens is that the anemones benefit from nutrients from the clownfish's waste, and the fish also protect the anemone from anemone-eating fish. So they have evolved to work together. And the other part of the evolution is that the anemone has stinging tentacles that are toxic to most predators, but not to the clownfish. So you see, this is a very interesting metaphor for what's happened with the evolution of these technologies and the e-patients. So with that, I'm going to go to just present some lessons that we had in the paper, and then I'm going to kick it off to the panelists. So as technology has evolved over the last 25 years, e-patients have leveraged it in unexpected ways. Remember, these technologies largely weren't developed for patients, but they've been used by patients. This has further spurred technology innovation in a symbiotic co-evolution. This in turn pushed successful digital health companies to evolve business models to capture the value. And then finally, there are recurrent themes that happen over and over and over. Themes have recurred you know, Dave and Gilles and I have talked about this, and others have talked about this a lot, which is that we think the issues that we're talking about right now are new issues, but they're not actually new, because we had the same, you know, for example, the use of AI in healthcare. You know, we're saying, oh, should patients be using AI, and is that a problem? Well, we had these same discussions when web searches became available. Same things recur over and over and over. And I'll leave with a little cartoon, which I kind of like. A stethoscope, how quaint. The paper that we keep talking about, the Sans Fin paper, is available at the QR code on the left, and a link to the Journal of Participatory Medicine site is on the right. So I'll leave that up for just a moment, and then I will hand it off to the panelists. Okay. Great. So now we are going to go through the panelists, and I think we're starting with Dave, as I recall. Is that right? Okay, so I'm going to hand it off to my colleague and patient, e-patient Dave.
I will go ahead and start sharing my slides. All set? Good. I want to point out, so I met Dr. Sands in 2002 when I was looking for a new PCP. And I want to point out that on his timeline, that is when the flip phone was shown as being an innovation then. So when I got my cancer in 2007, smartphones were just barely beginning to come along. Facebook and their fraudulently described as private groups did not exist. And that's all part of my story. But I also want to say, I'm going to take issue, as I sometimes do, with my doctor's opinion. I love the symbiotic picture of the clownfish and the anemones, but I got to say, that metaphor doesn't quite do it, because I don't exactly hide between his fingers getting protection from predators. And the metaphor doesn't cover what's really going on, which is the patient and the clinician sharing the work, all right, of taking care of my health. I got to say, hey, look, you look at the people who are presenting here with friends like this. Who needs anemones? I knew Danny would like that. Look at him laughing his tail off. Well, so here's the thing, that when I learned about the e-patient white paper, Danny shared it with me just a few months after my cancer treatment had completed. I read the thing in 3 days, and it just took off. My career was in innovation in high tech, specifically in graphic arts, but it doesn't matter because the pattern is the same. And I learned that if you really want to understand what's happening in an industry, you got to get down to what are the forces that are shifting. And this is a picture of Martin Luther nailing his 95 Theses to the door of the cathedral. This was a moment in history that I assert has strict parallels to what's happening today. And his 95 Theses essentially said to the Catholic Church, we don't need you to read the sacred books to us anymore. We will read it ourselves, and we will interpret it ourselves and have our own opinions. And I use this in some speeches now. It's the evolution of who knows what. And so let's see. This is Doc Tom, who back in the 1980s, we'll get to it, was foreseeing what we're living through today. And he came up with this term. Across the top of this slide, which I've been using since 2009, is right in the middle. You can see Danny. To the left is Susanna Fox. And way over on the left is Gilles Frydman. All these people who are real visionaries and they were friends of Tom Ferguson. As I started learning about Tom's work, I blogged a lot on ePatients.net, which is the Society's blog. In particular, I found out about something he published in 1985, The 7 Laws of Self-Care. This is the thing. He said, you are already your own doctor, right? People provide most of their own care at home. But clearly, in the ensuing 30 to 40 years, people did not become their own physician, and it raises the question of why, because that's what's changing now. First, for those who don't know it, when I was diagnosed, my median survival was 24 weeks. And the pivotal moment happened because Danny knew Gilles Frydman through Tom Ferguson. He said to me, I vividly recall this conversation during a visit. He said, Dave, you're an online kind of guy, because I'd been online since 1989 on CompuServe. He said, you might like to join this patient community, which was on Acor, a website run by, or actually it was a collection of listservs run by Gilles Frydman for various cancers, something he had started, I believe, in the 1990s. So this is why it's really good to hook up with visionaries who can see in advance. And in 2013, the BMJ asked me to publish my story of how this happened, which was amazing to me. I didn't go banging on their door. I didn't submit it. But they felt that what the dynamic of me helping to save my own life should be in the literature. And I asked my oncologist what he would want other doctors to know about this. And he said, you were really sick. I don't know if you could have tolerated enough medicine if you hadn't been so well prepared. Some people think that participatory medicine, that patient engagement is anti-physician. I have not stopped seeing doctors. That is an ignorant, wrong attitude. What he was talking about was that to help survive this treatment that is sometimes fatal, I turned to my patient peers and got firsthand stories of how they had survived the side effects. And it's vitally important to understand this. The advice they gave me does not exist in the literature. All right, there are additional sources of valid, life-saving knowledge beyond the literature. I subsequently went on to study what do we mean by empowerment. And about 2 years ago, the World Bank, who has been working on women's and girls' empowerment for decades, published this model, which I could go on about for ages, but they said empowerment happens by removing constraints. And this ties back to why we have not all become our own physician since Tom said that back in the 80s. And they had 3 buckets of constraints. Agency, the ability and willingness to take action, and resources, in particular, access to our data, right? So, I'm always sensitive to whether the establishment can hear what I'm talking about. So in May, I was thrilled when the National Academy of Medicine invited me to talk at their for their ongoing project on the evolving role of the physician in a world that has AI in it. And I said, look, compared to what Tom predicted, the first wave of empowerment was access to information, as Danny mentioned. Googling helped with that, and the other patients steering me to things. Access to the literature with PubMed, with other patients telling me where to look. Then we got something that's pivotal. If you know about SOAP notes, subjective, objective assessment and plan, the objective data, personal health devices. But all that flood of information all raised the question, what does it all mean? And that's where the clinical reasoning that generative AI is giving us is helping evolve. And I'm going to give one quick example of how that works out. Open Notes is a project. Danny and I were among the participants in the first clinical trial of Open Notes between 2010 and 2012. And one thing, the traditional physician attitude was patients can't handle the truth. And what this study showed is that at the end of the study, 99% of patients wanted to continue. Many doctors said they didn't want to, but when they saw the rest of the data, none of them did. And vitally important, more than 85% of patients in the 3 study centers said availability of notes would influence their choice of providers. Quick note here, Zach Kohane, the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine's AI journal, talked about how he had a new hire, faculty recruit in his department, and Zach himself could not find the guy a primary care physician, which means that we're going to have that. That just illustrates why more and more of us are striking out on our own. Hugo Campos is a name that many of you are aware of, and his brilliance as a user of AI for patient empowerment cannot be overstated. I'm sure everybody knows that when AI first came along, the establishment was saying, wait, this stuff hallucinates. It will give patients wrong answers and they will harm themselves. Hugo, when I asked him about this back in 2023, he laughed and said, Dave, I don't use it. I don't ask it for answers. I use it to help me think. And that's the way that we want to think about these tools. I'll look forward to further discussion here, but I want everybody to walk away with this one idea. Tom was right. And what's happening around us is the evolution of who knows what. And apps and AI will alter the patient's role. So thanks very much. I get pretty excited about this.
Thank you, Dave. That was exciting and interesting and important. It's a great way of looking at things, and I appreciate the friendly disagreements. That's good. And no metaphor is ever quite right for a situation. Now we're going to pass this off to my dear friend Gilles. Gilles, go ahead.
You're muted.
It's often better when I'm muted. I'm no longer muted, I guess. So I said it's really interesting. I think I'm going to present a lot of the same topics that Dave just spoke about, but in a different direction. What I wanted to talk about today, based on my experience in building online communities, is the e-patient upgraded. Because 30 years ago, there was only community, and today we have community, data, and AI. So patients 30 years ago, and like over the last generation, have built the first real-time health network. And AI is just the newest intern of it. It's brilliant, but it definitely needs supervision. 30 years ago, I started building ACOR, which was a nonprofit organization that created and managed over 250 online communities for all types of cancers and issues related to it. Then we built the second generation as a startup in Silicon Valley called Smart Patients, scaling moderated communities that made peer intelligence both practical, innovative, accelerating science, and helping people to obtain optimal care based on scientific gold standards. What I just said, I wish that the majority of doctors would be as seated in science as the online communities that we built. I wish that a lot of the doctors' decisions were as seriously based on the latest scientific gold standards as the discussion that we had on ACOR and then smart patients. While I was working on building ACOR, I met Tom Ferguson, who was the first doctor to recognize ACOR's value. And then soon after, we did the grand rounds at MD Anderson, which I think was the first time that a doctor brought a non-doctor to grand rounds. It was, I mean, the reception was amazing. Then we had a BMJ article or comment on the first generation of e-patients. I was, of course, involved in helping Tom write the e-patients white paper. And back then, we had only what appears today as very simple tools. They've just said listservs. We were using email. We were using PubMed to verify the content of the conversation on those listservs. And at the time, access by patients to PubMed was a radical concept. And today, access to your own data is just considered to be a civil right. One thing that Dave was speaking about, he was talking about the wearables. So I think that wearables are to health records what smartphones were to phones. It's like really significant paradigm shifts. And suddenly, patients have access to a lot of data. When we started to build those online communities, the internet was really basically a library. And today it has become an ecosystem of real-time collaboration. AI is the newest addition to the tools available to anyone, and it is creating a big change. It is providing to patients the ability to have agency. And so as Dave was speaking about Tom's 4 E's, can you remind me what they are, Dave?
Empowered, engaged, equipped, enabled, and
Well,
many others.
I want to add one more, emancipated, because comprehension creates agency and agency creates freedom.
Absolutely.
And I think it is really a huge change. So the core truth remains unchanged from what Tom was saying. The most underused resource in healthcare is the intelligence of the patient. What made the ACOR community a success? I think it was like 3 forces: pattern recognition, negotiating uncertainty, and shared workflows. So from what we learned with the ACOR listserv, we then created structured forums, and then the other tools came on top of those communities, searchable knowledge, and then the portals and open notes. At about that time, an amazing, I think he's a computer scientist, wrote an amazing book called Rediscovering Discovery. His name is Michael Nielsen. And what he wrote was about network science. What he didn't know was that in parallel, we were building network health. Every post, and today it's, of course, it has exploded. So every post that exists in valid online communities, plus all the data from wearables, we are able to create a distributed cognition. Then you add AI, and you have a huge extension, not a replacement of the collective mind. So I think we have only started to see what e-patients are going to be able to do. The key question today, now that AI is like overpresent, is who governs it? Is it institutions or people? Which is basically the same question that we had generations ago when I was asked to shut down ACOR because, oh my God, this is terrible. Patients having access to other patients discussing treatments, they're going to destroy the system, and you should shut down your system because it's incredibly dangerous. That's, of course, was not the case, and I'm quite convinced that the use of AI by patients is also going to be a major plus and not anything negative. I just want to give two little examples of what those online communities did, because they were really real life experience aggregators long before anybody ever used the term real life experience or real data. One of the communities that we had for people with multiple myeloma started to talk about the effect of biphosphonates on the jaw. Multiple people were mentioning that they had something called osteonecrosis of the jaw. And I think it's 2 to 3 years before it became known in the literature, and long before the FDA asked for a change in labeling of this family of drugs, people already knew that they were created, that those drugs had this side effect on many of them. And then we had another community where early members of a phase 1 clinical trial. So basically the phase 1 trial had 10 patients. We had 8 members of that trial started to talk a lot about what was happening. They discovered that they all had the same mutations. And from that moment on, whenever somebody would come to so it was for a community for leiomyosarcoma, which is already a rare cancer. Whenever somebody would come and said, I've just been diagnosed with leiomyosarcoma in this location in my body, they would say, you probably have been misdiagnosed. Go back to your doctor, ask to be checked if you have this mutation. And this simple thing helped save the lives of thousands of people and accelerated accrual in the trials exponentially. So those communities were absolutely amazing. What I want to say is that that revolution was social. And the new revolution of AI is of a different nature. It's linguistic. It's helping to understanding data. And that is what provides agency. The listserv provided the connection. AI is providing comprehension and is now directing people to have action with purpose. You can say it in another way. Listservs build solidarity, and AI builds the ability to decide. So I think that AI is not going to replace anyone. It should enable shared language. For example, you can turn unread PDFs and clinical notes into usable meaning. And just imagine what's going to happen if suddenly you put into patient community properly trained AI. We are going to have real conversation. The AI needs to be trained on real conversation, not marketing. So I can give an example. What does my sleep study means? And the AI will integrate wearable data, chart history, cite sources, and flag uncertainty. What I think AI is going to provide together with community is precision empowerment and not automation. Unfortunately, medicine still builds tools for systems and not for people. It uses, hospitals use AI to code faster, insurers use it to deny faster, but patients use AI to survive, just as they used ACOR to get answers to survive. So as AI is going to become probably, bigger than whatever we have done until now, we need to have core principles. If AI can't explain, cite, or refer, it does not belong to care. If it ignores literacy, it's defective. If it treats data as property, it's unethical. What AI needs is to learn from us. It needs to be community trained, safety governed, and transparent by design. The goal is to create more human medicine using technology, because as in opposition to what Danny said about the use of technology by the healthcare system, it's really technology to help business. And what patients do is a sociological change held by technology. It's a totally different perspective. And that perspective is so different that the people who live in the healthcare business cannot understand in general how profound is the use of like those evolving technology, how profoundly it changes how patients look into their role as patients, as equal partners in their care. And
Gilles, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up so that we have time for Denise and plenty of questions. So I'm sorry. Are these compelling
no,
remarks?
that's it.
Okay. Great.
I
Thank
can
you very
stop.
much, Gilles. You're always inspiring us and making us think in different ways. So thank you. With that, I will pass it off to another dear friend from Paris, Denise Silber. And she's going to spend the next few minutes talking to us, and then we're going to leave plenty of time for questions. So please put your questions in the Q&A window, and we will get to them. We have some plenty of things to talk about. Denise, go ahead.
Hi, so I'm Denise Silber. I am possibly the opposite of Gilles in that I'm an American who went to live in France, and Gilles is a Frenchman who went to live in the US. But in both cases, having this international perspective is extremely helpful, and I will be mentioning that. I want to explain how I got into digital health, which is that I was always aware that one could be a lucky patient or an unlucky patient, and the lucky one was the one who had a doctor around them in their regular life and who could help them navigate the system and get the best care, that there really was a two-level system. And when I discovered PubMed, when it came out or shortly thereafter in the mid-90s, I thought, oh my goodness, this is going to change everything. Only it has, but just partially, because we have lived through all the waves of technology after PubMed and the web, as has been mentioned, smartphones, then mobile apps. Each time with that Gardner curve, we thought everything was going to change and become perfect. Thanks to the apps, we were collecting data, and then with the connected objects, even more data, which makes sense that there was such a bed ready for AI, and AI is now today's God. I want to talk about, because Dave and Gilles have already very eloquently explained what is patient engagement, what the engaged patient can do, which is everything. I want to talk about something that is perhaps less recognized, which is the patient's role in being an innovator or inventor with the technology. Because I do believe that getting access to knowledge is fantastic, and it can help you have incredible exchange with those who detain the technology. But that until patients go out there and create technology that responds to their observations and needs, we won't have done enough. So that's going to be my message, which is to not just be helping yourself, if you have the energy and the possibility, to see how you can help co-create. And I'm going to be giving some examples. Sorry. Okay. So this is also a tribute to Michael Sears. I actually should mention as well that through my career, I had the great opportunity of creating an event called Doctors 2.0 and You, which was a partner to Stanford Medicine X. Through that, I met many of you here, and I was able to give keynote status to patients, which certainly in Europe, even though this was an international conference, was pretty rare. It might have been the first to do so, and only just beginning in the US. So Michael was a patient suffering from Crohn's disease from a very early age, from adolescence, who was also brilliant. And he started by blogging. But at one point in his life, unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago at age 50. I believe it was 2020. He had created the company 11 Health. The 11 was that he'd been the 11th person to get a a colon replacement transplant. And what you see on the right is a stomie, and the blue and metal is the piece that he had imagined without actually being an engineer that could create the collection of data such that a person wearing this would no longer have to worry about overflow and many other problems. So he was just brilliant and amazing and human and incredible. In the world of diabetes, I have been fascinated by the continuous glucose monitor that was created with in open source in the US and pursued as well in Europe. The one on the left is the US version, Dana Lewis, who was a diabetes patient, and the one on the right, a group of people have worked on continuously to develop it. And I thought that I would show you this chart, which has, for the past 12 years, many inventions. There's our friend Frederick DeBong and Frank Westerman, who created My Sugar, which was later purchased by Rush, which enabled diabetes patients. It's obvious that cardio and diabetes, as well as cancer, all the ones that have a lot of data, lend themselves to the creation of this invention. But they created a company that they ultimately sold to a pharmaceutical company. Ida Tin, this is more of a female consumer product. She's in Germany, and she created Clue, which is a very valuable company today with millions of patients using it, and that has generated scientific data showing that there are tremendous differences in what happens to women during menstruation, and that uncovered through symptom collection relationships to multiple diseases that were sort of hidden in plain sight. I mentioned 11 Health. So Aaron Orr is of Israeli background, living in the US, and he had neck problems, I believe, from being a pilot. And he learned that virtual reality could work wonders with pain. There is now a considerable body of literature and many products in this area, one of which is TRIP, which you see on the right. TRIP was developed by a woman named Nanea Reeves, whose husband had died from cancer, and she wanted to develop this product to make meditation available to everyone. It uses virtual reality, and she has since developed it for mobile apps so that you're not limited to using it with the headset. But she is like a number one non-scientist inventor of a tool that really helps millions of people. And in France, we have a patient named Axel Ayad who has endometriosis, who had noted that there were so many people who didn't know where to go for these not truly rare, but somewhat rare diseases. And she first created a platform called Mapato, which is like My Pathology, with recommended specialists all over the country in case you move or where to go for multiple diseases and patient communities. And most recently has created patient-led health insurance for those who might have a hard time getting insurance. So my message in all of this is that there have been extraordinary, if we go back to Tom Ferguson, there's on the one hand, and as Gilles and Dave were saying, we're talking sort of about approaches to pedagogy, to communication, to picking up existing knowledge, perhaps to collecting your own data and sharing it with the doctor. But there's an army of people out there who aren't necessarily engineers or physicians or nurses who have been able to navigate the complicated world of raising funds and creating inventions and going about selling them so that they can benefit to the broader audience in the same way that the stethoscope was a few hundred years ago. And I really applaud those people. And I myself live the life of the engaged patient, looking always to try to optimize and to help people who might be elsewhere and a bit lost and aren't getting what they need, including from ChatGPT, but I thought that I should bring up just all these fabulous heroes that are worth your knowing about. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Great comments. I love the international perspective and the entrepreneur's perspective as well, which is great because that's where innovation occurs largely. With that, we will switch over to our Q&A session, and I see there are some Q&As, some questions, I should say, in the chat and in the Q&A section. So I will rip through some of these things and see a response. So the first question was from Shannon Canfield, and it's about the barriers and facilitators of meaningfully using patient-generated health data in clinical decision-making. You know, I think that I'm going to take a first stab at that since I've worked a lot with patient-generated health data. And I think that we cannot think that we're really taking, and I'm speaking as a doctor now, I'm a primary care doctor taking care of a population of patients. We can't really believe that we're taking care of a population of patients when we only see patients, you know, a couple times a year, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, right? So health happens between visits. If we're going to manage a population of patients, we need data from outside the visits too. And there are a whole bunch of obstacles to that, you know, and just to cite a few of them, we could talk for a long time about this. We need to understand the quality of the data that's being acquired outside. And, you know, as we use it in medical decision making, we want to make sure that we're managing the risks of requested versus unrequested data from the healthcare professional side. So in other words, if Dave submitted some data that I wasn't looking for and it was concerning data, you know, who's looking at that data? You know, am I responsible for looking at this data if something bad happens and so on? So there's that whole thing. So the data provenance, the issue of risk of requested versus unrequested data. We also need a way of bringing that information meaningfully into the records that we're using to manage our patients. And most health systems have not permitted that patients to submit their data in that way. And then pushing into AI, I think we need to be able to digest this data. We need to be able to process the data that's coming in, because if I have a patient who wants to send me, you know, 24 blood pressure measurements a day and all the steps they're taking and everything they ate. Hey, Dave, I'm looking at you. And everything they ate and all their footsteps and so on, that's not to human scale to look at this. So we need to use technology tools to help us process this information. So I'm going to turn it over to my panelists to see if they have anything to add to this. There are a whole bunch of other issues we could talk about related to this. It's very important. We need to be able to do this effectively. And I think AI is going to give us, agentic AI is going to give us some of the solutions to do that. Dave, Denise, or Gilles, you want to comment on any of that? Okay, let's turn to the next question then. Although I noticed my open questions all went away. Okay, so there's a question. Is e-patient in 2025, this is from Lawrence Alpe, is e-patient in 2025 an inclusive concept, or has it created disparity in patient engagement and empowerment? So I'd love to hear your responses to that, panelists. It's a very important question.
Well, I'll start. This is an eternal question. Every time there's an advancement in technology, there's a concern about the digital divide. I don't think it's a useful place to focus the attention because what we are in the middle of continuously is an evolution. As my slide said, the evolution of who knows what. And in the same way that when smartphones were new, there were floods of people speaking at conferences who said, wait a minute, lots of people don't have this. It's making equity problems worse. Well, you look at what's happened since then. There's a very small number of people relatively around the world. I see Denise nodding in agreement. I think the thing that's useful is to keep pushing for new technologies to be explored and help them migrate downstream. prices always get less expensive, and I'll pass the mic to whoever wants it next.
Yeah,
Denise?
I agree. We've really seen it how over time, and this is true of everything. There's a famous curve or graph about the early adopters all the way to the laggards. This will be true of everything. Secondly, there are equity problems already, and I've not seen any innovation so far, other than maybe there's that billionaire guy who's trying to live forever, and maybe that's going to be limited to him and his billionaire buddies. But really, truly, almost everything else moves ahead as all innovation does. So if nobody starts it, then nobody will benefit from it. Is that the right way to go? I say no.
Great. And any other comments on that before I move on to the next question? Oh, Gilles, go ahead.
So I'm going to take my usual voice of dissent. I think that many of those technologies do have a negative influence on the digital divide, especially when it comes to the delay in availability for communities that don't speak English. That's a really big thing. And that creates like a really real digital divide. We can't close our eyes. We can't say that it's not an issue. It doesn't mean that we have any easy way to resolve it, but we have to be aware that it does exist.
Great. And I think that, well, Amy had a comment. Sorry. Go ahead, Amy.
I'd like to say that the disparity is already there, and it has been there forever. So it's not something to blame on patients getting involved or technology. The question is, how will we use technology to decrease this divide? So, for example, it's said now that over 90% of people from the ages of 0 to 100 use cell phones actively, daily. I remember pictures of people in countries where even in maternity wards, they were 4 to 6 to 1 bed. And they didn't have a bed, but they all had cell phones. So I think that we should be looking at the technology as a way to bring in, to welcome people, and to share what we have and hear from them about how to bridge those disparities, rather than see it as have it as a distraction or a divide to patient engagement and involvement.
Thank you. And I'm going to put one more twist on this before we move on to the next question, which is that, yes, these disparities are there. We need to understand them. They are, and what we heard from our panelists is that the disparities over time go away. You know, for example, we used to worry about people accessing the internet, but now, you know, globally, people have cell phones. They don't worry about whether they have a hardwired connection to what we used to call broadband connection to the internet, right? They don't care. We don't care about that because they have a phone, which is their portal to the internet. But I think the other thing is that as a healthcare system, we need to meet people where they are. So we can't assume that everybody has the latest and greatest technology or is capable of doing that. I have patients like Dave, who's always using the latest things, the latest technology. He's an early adopter, right? But I have patients who, because of their socioeconomic background, lack of education, whatever, they can't access anything. They don't feel comfortable downloading an app. So we have to meet everybody where they are. And I think that's very important as well. And a question that just popped into the question box, which was interesting, and it's a related topic somewhat, is that what do we think about patient empowerment when the patient might be using culturally based remedies, such as herbal remedies, traditional Chinese medicine remedies, etc.? How can they best inform the Western trained medical team, as well as prevent issues like drug interactions, etc. So I think that's another example of meeting patients where they are. Do the panelists have any response to that? Denise?
Go ahead.
As regards meeting patients where they are, I'm thinking of a distance program for people with compliance issues. You may all know that certain rheumatological diseases require rather complex prescriptions. And patients don't necessarily want to come to a class where they're being treated like with other people in person, pointing out that they're not doing it right. So, a hospital I know of in France developed a tele-training program for patients where they don't have to identify themselves, they don't have to use their camera. We know that they're the right people because only they received the link. And this has worked very well in improving. So I spoke with the rheumatologist herself who developed this program. She wishes that it could become worldwide. She's not an entrepreneur. But so that's an example of meeting people where they are in their home through the equivalent of telemedicine to train them on how to figure out complex prescriptions.
Write an article for the journal, please, on that.
Okay.
Yeah,
No, it's
I love
terrific.
it.
Something that works. Yeah. And then we called for more research to prove that it scales.
And there is a theme in that comment from the question, which is about culturally sensitive care. And we need to recognize the fact that, patients come from a culture. I can't tell a patient who's from Southeast Asia to adopt a Mediterranean diet to help their health issues. I have to appreciate where they're coming from. There's this concept called a heritage diet, which is that you focus on where a patient's coming from, what their staples are, and you design a diet around that. But I think there are other themes that I don't think we're going to have a chance to talk about, which has to do with, when patients are using alternative medicine or non-Western medicine, how do we keep them safe? And that's a whole other set of challenges, which I think is important. I have one last question in the last couple of minutes that we have. And as I was listening to these various, the panelists speak, I'm going to ask this question. So this is about AI, okay? How do we ensure that AI tools don't remain segregated, with doctors and patients each using their own AI tools in isolation? How can they collaborate using AI?
Well, very quickly, I don't think there is an ensure to be had here because you can't manage what the heck everyone's doing, and I'll hand it to others.
Enable. Let's say enable.
Well, giant problem here. I use ChatGPT all the time. As you know, you have no ability to look at what I did. I want an open collaborative AI where I can do stuff and you can see it and vice versa. Sam Altman, you looking? You listening?
Great. Gilles, what are your thoughts about this?
I want to go back to something else. Can I? No, but it's kind of related. I said that the AI revolution is a linguistic one. It's not like the other technologies. If you don't know how to prompt properly those AI chatbots, you're not going to get the right answers. And so in order for you as a doctor to understand what the patient is doing, you really need to see how they're prompting the systems to get how they think and how they obtain the data that helps them come with questions to you.
Okay. I think that, so I'm going to actually go, I just realized we're at the top of the hour. So I'm going to give each panelist a final 20 seconds to say their summation remarks before we wrap this up. We'll start with Denise.
Please be the kind of person who won't let obstacles stop you from improving your health or that of people around you.
Great. Dave?
Keep exploring what is becoming newly possible because that's where futures open up. It's what Tom talked about. keep looking at that and pushing it forward. And that applies to innovators as well as patients and researchers.
Super. Gilles?
Michael Nielsen showed that network science changed how we know. E-patients proved it can change how we heal. Now AI asks whether we can stay human while becoming more intelligent.
I love it. All right. Well, I want to thank the panelists. This has been a compelling panel, a lot of interesting food for thought here. This is great. I want to encourage you all to check out the Journal of Participatory Medicine. Read the article that spurred this. I can't see what Dave's holding up there, but it's
The article.
Okay, the article. There it is. Thank you. So you know, as we want submissions at the journal, we would love you to join the society. If you have any questions about the society, let me know. You can reach me at danny@participatorymedicine.org. With that, I want to thank JMIR for hosting this, and all the panelists and all of the participants today. Thank you very much.